today's presentation today is on child labor and really bringing on seasonal employees. I'm going to go through some of the intro stuff fairly quickly, and then really answer those questions as it comes to 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds. What can they do? Can we hire them? And some of the really specific requirements that they have based on the different ages of those youthful workers. So we'll dive in and hit that. Really, we can't run our operations in most of our local governments without volunteers, without seasonal employees. They're essential to us, and it's a challenge. I understand where you're at right now, trying to hire people. There may be a real imperative to hire younger workers because you can't hire older workers because they're hard to come by, and I get it. And that's really the reason why I wanted to present this subject today, was to help out where we can, just so you understand where it is. These are federal and state laws that we're going to be talking about. The trust doesn't have necessarily specific requirements to this. We tell you to keep the law, stay to the federal and state laws when it comes to this, and that will protect us from most of our liability issues. However, as we talk about bringing on new employees, the act of bringing on new employees increases the risk to our operations. What we've seen over time is that our employees that are new have a much higher risk of having an accident, and the reasons for that could be various. Training, experience. They may be just young and they haven't done this type of thing before. There are a lot of reasons why that is, but just suffice it to say that the risk of having accidents goes way up when we have new employees, whether they're young or older. A new employee is a riskier employee, and volunteers the same way. So as we look at what our options are when it comes to seasonal employees, a lot of times we have volunteers. We may hire adults, we may hire youth, we may bring people in from a temp agency. And all of these are viable options that can work in one way or another. Volunteers and seasonal employees bring risk with them. So we have greater risk of liability because they're representing our organization, they're out doing work for us. They can cause a liability risk. They can they can damage other people's property, they can hurt other people through the work that they're doing, and we could end up on the hook to pay that bill. They also bring with them workers' compensation exposure, even those volunteers. And so we have to look at that. Their risk of having an accident goes up. Okay. It's a unique exposure. They have less experience. And I know there are a lot of young people that are wise beyond their age, but there are also some bad decisions that are made by youthful workers because they don't have the experience of doing a job for a long time. We may need to put more supervision towards this type of a workforce. And then we've got the child labor laws, which we'll dive into in just a minute or so. Just one point I'd like to bring up on this. Sometimes an employee or a temporary employee, or not temporary, a seasonal employee may end up their season injured. They get injured, they hurt their back or their shoulder or something like that, and they're taken off work, or they have restrictions against what they can do. We want to be really careful about terminating that employee. When we terminate an employee that is on workers' compensation, either restricted duty or off work for that, we lose our ability to really control the direction that claim takes. So our guidance to you is don't terminate, even if it's the end of their season. What you can do in those cases is work with that employee. Let them know, hey, we have work here for you, even if it's bringing them into something that's a little bit different than what they originally hired for. And what traditionally will happen with this, we end up getting the employee back to full duty, or they're on restricted duty to come back to work. And you can call up that temporary seasonal employee and let them know, hey, we've got a job here for you. And their response is, well, I'm in school, I'm in college, I can't work. And then we can say, well, then you're resigning. It gives us some latitude in managing that workers' compensation claim to have it go like that. But don't just terminate them, because we lose a lot of control. All right. Supervision, we may need to increase the ratio of supervisors to the number of employees that are out there, just because we got to keep a better eye on them, because they might make some bad decisions. They might need to have somebody looking over their shoulder a little more. And I'm not saying that's for everybody, but sometimes that's the case. Temp agencies. Some of you out there use temp agencies to backfill in some of the jobs. That can be a good option. It's really convenient. I don't have to go through the hiring process. I really like it because I don't have to go through a termination process if the employee just doesn't work out. All I do is call the temp agency and say, yeah, I don't want them back tomorrow. and it's as simple as that. If they don't meet the cut, we just end that temp agreement for that employee and we move on. It may cost us more, though. We're paying a premium to that temp agency to be able to have their employees really at our beck and call and say, I need 3 people today and none tomorrow. They are paying for the workers' comp coverage for that employee. So we reduce that exposure, and some of those excess incidents that might happen, we might not have that make a hit against our own EMOD, because the temp agency takes that on. They do expose us to liability exposure. Like we said, the work that they do, they do something inappropriate, that's going to come back on our organization. So there's a lot of balances in using a temp agency. Volunteers are awesome. We probably couldn't have the type of local government services and programs that we have around the state in anything that resembles what we have if it weren't for volunteers. We can get experienced people with great skills that we wouldn't be able to hire otherwise, because they believe in the community and they want to help us out. And it's basically free labor. Sometimes we'll find that they're a little more independent people because they're in a different group. They have experience, and they may, who knows, they may be a CEO of a company somewhere, but they're coming in to volunteer at our organization because they believe in it. So that can be good, it can be bad as well. It may be harder to supervise them. When we talk volunteers, it's important that we have an approved volunteer list, that there is a list there that is approved by the chief executive officer. So whoever that is in your organization. With cities, many times it's the mayor or the city manager, the person that is available, that has the responsibility overall the operation. So we want to have a list. Now, I realize that we'll get volunteers that come in for a community cleanup day or something like that. That's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about regular volunteers that are staying with us. They have a job at the library, they're shelving books, they're working at the animal shelter or something like that. We want to have them approved on a roster. Now, why is that? Well, they need to be approved to have the workers' compensation coverage. So as a volunteer in the state of Utah, you're a de facto employee under workers' compensation. Now that's good and bad, right? We would much prefer if a volunteer gets injured to pay for that injury, the medical cost for that, through the workers' compensation system. versus having it be a liability claim and they sue us to get us to pay for whatever that is. Workers' compensation is statutory. It's very well defined. We know what it's going to end up costing us within reason on that. If it's a liability claim, we don't have nearly as much control over it. So we want those volunteers on that approved list or roster. And realize though that this workers' compensation coverage in most positions only provides medical coverage. So we'll pay for surgeries or medical care, whatever that may entail for their injuries that are part of their work. But it doesn't pay for lost time. Now there are exceptions to that. Volunteers that are in the public safety world, search and rescue, volunteer firefighters, they also have coverage based on, and volunteer police officers as well. They will have the lost time coverage as well. All right. Told you I was going quick on this, but there's a lot of stuff here. Select volunteers. I would do this similar to hiring. We want to make sure we get the right volunteer doing the right job. If we mess up and put somebody where they shouldn't be, maybe they have a disability or something that we didn't take the time to ask about, and they can't perform the type of tasks that we're asking, or we put them at risk of getting injured, well, that's a bad deal. So I would look at their experience, look at their availability. I would do something similar to a hiring process, have an interview, and this is a good way to thank them and to make sure we get them in a position that is best for both them and our organization. Now, if they're going to be driving, I definitely want to do an MVR check on them if they're driving as part of their volunteer duties. We want to do an MVR check and ensure that they have a valid license and they have a good driving record there. Some people may be working with vulnerable groups, like we have a coach or referees or something like that, where they're working with children. We have an obligation to be looking at them for any background that might be inappropriate for them to be working with those vulnerable groups. So background checks would be important. I have another webinar here or on the YouTube channel that you can look at on background checks. But I would look at that for anybody working with children, maybe vulnerable seniors, and additionally people who are working with money. And would have the opportunity to potentially misappropriate funds. It would behoove us to have a background check for them. Okay. So I would make not necessarily a job offer, but a memo of understanding with that volunteer as to what their responsibilities are and what we expect for them and what they can expect from us. Have a job description that kind of says here's what we want you to do, so they don't go beyond that. I would do training with them similar to what we do with employees. We need to help them be successful, and that might be doing some safety training. That might be looking at all of their hazards that are on their job and ensuring that they have appropriate training, personal protective equipment, those types of things. It may be appropriate, depending on their job, to do some harassment prevention training. And it's always good to have good supervision. And so let them know who their supervisor is and how they will interact with them. All right, Mike, did we have any questions come in so far?
Nope, no questions.
Okay. I just wanted to take a drink, mostly.
Nope, you're doing a good job.
Now we're shifting gears right now, and we're going to talk about the child labor laws. So this is probably the most common question that we get in the springtime of every year. Hey, we're having a hard time hiring people. Can we hire 12-year-olds? Can 16-year-olds drive vehicles? Can, et cetera, as we go down the line, all the different types of questions that we get. So wanted to hit these subjects quickly. There are really two distinct categories and it's actually even more than that. There's 14 and 15-year-olds and 16 and 17-year-olds are two separate groups. 16 and 17-year-olds will also be divided up based on the type of work that they can do, and specifically on driving. So let's talk about some of these important things. There are state laws and federal laws when it comes to child labor. And this presentation is kind of a compilation of both of those. We are always going to go with the more strict of the two laws. So if the federal law is more strict, that's what we're going to talk about. And I'm not going to make a real distinction over which is which. I'm just trying to give you a good overview of here's what the requirements are. All right. So we got 14 and 50-year-olds, 16 and 17-year-olds. Minimum wage can be different, and it can be reduced for people during their training period, right? When they come in as a minor, I can have 90 calendar days where I only have to pay them $4.25 an hour for their minimum wage. After that 90 days, then I have to go up to the regular minimum wage of $7.25. Now, I don't think this is even something that anybody's going to consider, because if you can get somebody to work for $4.25 right now, you're doing pretty well. Most of the time, we're probably pushing at least beyond the regular minimum wage, but just realize that you can do that. Hours of work. 14 and 15-year-olds have much more restricted requirements on their ability or on their time of work. So we can't schedule them to work during school hours. Okay, it is a law. I can't schedule that when they're supposed to be in school. I can't schedule them before 7 a.m. or after 7 p.m. I remember a few jobs that we probably didn't keep that very well when I was growing up. During the summer with 14 and 15-year-olds, I extend the evening hours to 9 p.m. But it's still very restricted when it comes into account there. All right, 14 and 15-year-olds. They cannot work more than 3 hours on a school day. They can't work more than 8 hours on non-school days. And they can't work more than 18 hours during the school week, during the school year. And during the summer, when they're off school, or if you're year-round, whenever they're off scheduled school, they can't work more than 40 hours in a work week. So no overtime for those employees. All right. Let's see, covered that. I don't know if I duplicated that slide. Here's some exceptions. There's always a few exceptions. If a 14 or 15-year-old has graduated from high school, they're a genius and they've already graduated from high school, but they decide that they want to come mow lawns for you. We'll have to talk about that in a minute, but technically they can work because they're not in school. If they are excused from compulsory attendance for one or more reasons, then they can go to work. If they have been emancipated, or they're married, or they have children, then they can get a job. Okay. If they're permanently expelled, then they can get beyond these rules. Let's see, and I think, and sport attending services. This is based around professional sports, like a ball boy or ball girl at a professional sport. Doesn't really apply to any of us, I don't think. 16 and 17-year-olds, we don't have limitations on the hours worked, except for regular work rules, the FLSA for that. I have to pay them overtime if they work overtime, using the same calculations and all of that. There are fewer restrictions on the type of work that they do. However, there's still a lot of restrictions. Just like other jobs, we need to provide them breaks. So if I need to provide a 30-minute meal break if they go beyond 5 hours, at or beyond 5 hours of work, they've got to have a 30-minute meal break and then a 10-minute break for each 3 hours work. So in general, you're going to have 2 breaks and a half-hour lunch during their 8-hour work shift. So dangerous occupations are prohibited. These are ones that are prohibited for 14 and 15-year-olds. Manufacturing, mining, processing, hoisting apparatus like cranes or forklifts, window washing, elevated window washing, boiler or engine rooms, maintenance or repair of machinery equipment, operation of motor vehicles. Well, of course, 14 and 15-year-olds, we're not going to have them operating motor vehicles. However, we might be tempted. You'd say, oh, well, what about an ATV? What about a golf cart? And the answer is no. Under these regulations, we can't have them driving those vehicles. Working as a driver's helper is also prohibited. Riding on the outside of the vehicle, in the bed of a pickup or on a trailer or things like that. We shouldn't have any of our employees doing those types of tasks, but especially a 14 or 15-year-old or 16 or 17, or any other thing that's identified by the Secretary of Labor. And so this list can change over time. So 14, and this continues on saying anything that is a power-driven machine. So does that mean a lawnmower? The answer is yes. So 14, 15-year-olds, no lawnmowers, no edgers, no golf carts, ATVs, trimmers, cutters, saws, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so as you can see, when we start 14 and 15-year-olds, those are really, really restricted in the types of tasks that they can do. Peddling, going door to door, selling things, working in freezers and coolers or any industrial type cooking, baking operations, catching and cooping of poultry. I did that when I was younger than 14 and 15, and the chickens do have large talons, if you're asking. Then we move on to 16 and 17-year-olds. Mike, do we have any questions on the 14 and 15-year-olds so far?
Nope, no questions, but quality Napoleon Dynamite reference.
Yes, definitely. I wondered why everybody thought Napoleon Dynamite was such a funny movie. It was just my life, except I can't dance. Anyway, I did far too much of what I saw in Napoleon Dynamite. Hazardous occupations for 16 and 17-year-olds. They can't work with explosives or in mining, forestry, powered woodworking equipment. So chainsaws, circular saws, band saws, powered hoisting equipment, cranes, forklifts, powered metal forming or powered bakery equipment, powered balers and compactors. I can't have them putting cardboard into a baler. Other things would be like guillotine shears, wood chippers, cutting discs, wrecking, demolition, shipbreaking, roofing, or excavation. I can't put them in a trench. They can't be down working in, even looking at digging up sprinklers and that could fall into that excavation category. I can't have them doing that kind of work. So 16 and 17-year-olds, here is the overall rule that a lot of people get frustrated with, but rules are rules, and it's not my rule. It's the federal and state labor laws. No driving of motor vehicles for 16 and 17-year-olds, except, and there are a few exceptions, we can allow 17-year-olds to drive. 16-year-olds may not drive. So does that mean I can't hire them? No, they just can't drive as part of their work. Does that mean I can have them go out, a 16-year-old go out and mow lawns at the park? Well, a couple of things come into that. One, to get there, if somebody else drives them to the park, yeah, you're good to go. The other part of that is, what type of equipment am I working on? I want to look at this equipment as, is it an industrial type equipment? If I've got one of these giant rider mowers that, has the wings that fold down, or, a more that looks more like an industrial type, I would really steer clear of those. If it looks more like something you would use in your yard at home, then you can probably, along with appropriate training and all of those things, have them do that kind of work. All right, let's get back to the driving. So the exception, 17-year-olds may drive under a few of these conditions. Number one, they need to be 17 years old, licensed for the type of vehicle they're driving. So they can't drive a semi, because you can't get that kind of license at that age. So they need to be licensed for that class of vehicle. They need to have attended a state-approved driver education course, have no moving violations on their record, and we can help you locate what that is. Not drive vehicles greater than 6,000 pounds. So cars and light trucks would be okay, but any of these heavier vehicles, no. They need to wear seat belts, and that needs to be mandatory. They need to be instructed on how they're going to be doing their job. Here's the big kicker on this. The driving that they do is incidental to the work that they do. So here's a quick example. Could a 17-year-old drive a city pickup truck or district pickup truck out to the park and do whatever maintenance out there, mowing, trimming, those type of work? The answer is probably. If they're driving park to park to park to park, and it composes a third of their workday just driving from one place to another, then they probably couldn't. But let's say I go out there, I drive to one park and it takes me 3 hours there. I take a lunch, and then I end up driving to another park and I spend 4 hours there and my day is done. Well, that driving is probably incidental, right? The time that we spent driving is incidental to the overall work of the day. So here's some help to clarify that. My driving cannot compose more than 1/3 of the workday or 1/5 of the work week. So really, it needs to be very incidental. Their job should be just going out and getting from place to place. They can't tow trailers. Like we said, 6,000 pounds vehicle or less. No motorcycles, no ATVs, no golf carts. And that's kind of a rough one. A lot of people look at that and say, whoa. That's who we hire at our golf course, or these younger people for that. There is a document that the Department of Labor shared, kind of an interpretation on that, and it said golf carts can be okay for these 17-year-olds as long as they're not operating in the right of way, right? As long as they're not operating on roads. So theoretically, you could have a 17-year-old out working at a golf course, and as long as they're not driving through the parking lot or driving down the road on those, they would be okay. But they even talked in that letter of interpretation about parking lots where regular traffic is going around. So that's kind of a sticky one there. So no golf carts, no route deliveries or sales, no transportation for hire. They can't drive buses, things like that. Can't be an Uber driver. No more than 3 passengers in the vehicle, and they shouldn't go beyond a 30-mile radius of their center point of operation. And if they're doing deliveries, no more than 2 trips per day. Sorry, there's a lot of minutia on this, and that's just how it is in this world. So you got to take all of this and kind of say, what are the job duties? And if you've got a good job description, it makes it easier. But what are their job duties, and can we make it work for them? Okay, so just on seasonals, we talked about if they're off work, don't terminate those folks. If they've got restrictions, we don't want to terminate them at the end of their season either. Call us the trust, and let's make a plan here, or the adjuster of their claim, so we don't end up having that claim get out of hand. We definitely want to be involved with that, get the person healthy as soon as we possibly can. And to do that, maintaining that employer-employee relationship is important. So, okay. Just to summarize, this is a challenge. I know these people are extremely important to our operations, whether they're a volunteer or a seasonal or a temp, whether they're young or old. They all bring with them their own challenges. We're here to help answer any questions that you might have. And we appreciate all of the work that you're doing out there, and we appreciate you taking the time to think about these subjects, because they're really important.